We'd now like to call on, with nearly 4 decades of experience in hypnotherapy, coaching, psychotherapy, educational consulting, and teaching, a very results-driven leader helps her client uncover and release root causes that facilitate healing and promote positive change. She has been selected as our top hypnotherapist and coach of the year, Dr. Lisa Zaretsky. Please join us up here.
Wow, I'm really humbled to be amongst such amazing, great people tonight. And there are so many people here that I have such common experiences with and common training. And I have this speech, which I'm putting down because so many of you really spoke to the majority of my speech. I was going to go into hypnotherapy. Kelly, you went into that. But I will touch a little bit about it. And my journey has been continually seeking, and hypnotherapy actually was something that was a profound change for me. Like many of you also, I've had an enormous amount of trauma throughout my life, what I call sometimes the unthinkable, as have many of you. And I've had the unthinkable and the unthinkable and the unthinkable. And it can get you down, and it can get you stuck and stop, or it could keep you going. And one of the things I realized was that the pain that I experienced and the traumas and the difficulties actually fueled my perseverance. And my greatest achievements have been through my darkest times. And I've experienced things that I can write a book about, which I have, and I'll speak a little bit about that too. And when I reflect back what I have achieved during those times, I've harnessed these skills and I've harnessed these techniques and strategies, and I did put them into a book and I put them into my practice. A little bit about me as I've continued to seek. First, I went into education. And I went to the University of Wisconsin, and I was a special ed major, and I wanted to double major in elementary ed as well. And I'm a really sucky test taker, and they had a test taking, like an SAT kind of thing that I had to do. And I studied really hard, and I was home on a Friday night, and I get a knock on my door in my apartment in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's the Madison police. Apparently my roommate, her boyfriend, was a drug smuggler, and I had no idea. And I was interrogated for 2 hours. And clearly the next morning, I did really poorly on the standardized test to get in, and I didn't get in. And so what did I do? And I had graduated a year early. I was in school at 16. I decided to transfer because I said, you know what? I'm not going to let this get in my way. And even though I love this school, I'm going to go after what I want. So I transferred to NYU, and I finished up with my dual degree in elementary and special ed, and I went into the field. And I realized something was missing in these classrooms, something big. No one was dealing with mental health and social emotional issues at all. This is in the late 80s and early 90s. And I felt helpless. So I said, how can I do something about this? So I went back for my master's in social work. And I finished that. And I was brought out into the schools because I had the educational background. And I did social skills groups, and I worked in inpatient and outpatient, adolescent and child mental health. I worked with mentally ill homeless, and again, I was seeing such a disconnect. There was such a disconnect amongst all these populations, and really what was at the heart of the matter. And I found that professionals were blaming families and blaming parents and blaming this one, and there was so much blame, and no one was looking to get to the root causes or what was going on underneath everything. So I worked in the social work field in many different realms for a while, and I got burnt out. So I went back to teaching, and I saw it again. And I went for my teacher of reading degree. I said, oh, maybe I can do something here. There are all these kids with these wide, diverse brains, and no one is helping them. So how can I help? Maybe I can help in this way. So I did that. And as I did that, I wound up really loving what I was doing. And at that time, I had a baby. And when my baby was 8 weeks old, my father was murdered. And I was the last one to see him. So I went through another realm of trauma, not to mention the trauma from my childhood up until then. And yet I was raising an 8-week-old baby. I was working full time, and I was also injured at birth. So I was in a lot of pain chronically. And I went from doctor to doctor to doctor, and no one can help me. And I was in chronic pain that lasted for many, many years. So I kept seeking answers, and I wound up getting into integrative medicine and learning a lot more about different techniques in terms of therapy that I was trained in at NYU. I went for my master's at NYU. And little by little, my journey on this integrative, expansive approach started, and I started to see another way. But what I really learned about was the power of the mind. And the power of the mind trumps everything else. I didn't get into hypnotherapy until 20 years later, but I started to learn about the power of the mind and my power, the power within, and how there was this heart-mind cohesion, and that if I led with my heart and I allowed myself to be in the driver's seat of my mind, and these two things were connected, that's where my achievement came. But I learned one thing further, how to harness my pain, because I was in pain over and over and over again from the different things that kept happening. And instead of victimhood or why me, how can I keep going? Because eventually then I had another child, and that child was injured at birth, and I was still working, and we had financial issues, and I was still dealing with the legal system with my father. The list goes on. These are the stories that I can tell, but they're also stories. And what I also learned was that if I continued to tell myself these stories, and they looped and they looped and they looped, and how I internalized what my life was like, what I internalized at whatever age it was, that's the loop it became, and the stories kept going. And I had to be in charge of the narrative. And if I continued to stay in the old chapters, I would continue to stay stuck. So I needed to be in charge and get in the driver's seat of my mind to create new chapters. And again, that's where I was the most successful. Fast forward, more trauma, COVID, car accident, estrangement, you name it. And I decided I'm going to go back for my doctorate. And I got my doctorate in an area of interest, which was cognitive diversity, all things mind, all things brain. And it pulled everything together. And then I found hypnotherapy. And I was trained in hypnotherapy prior to this, but I found something called rapid transformational therapy developed by Marissa Peer. And it was incredible because it gets to the roots, reasons, and causes of everything. So after I was trained in that, and I was in a room of 70 people from all over the world, such trauma, but such profound healing, again, reminded me of the power of the mind. And then I got trained in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is really cool. And I did 6 months of mentorship with that also, and I kept questioning myself, well, how is this different than hypnotherapy? The bottom line is it's still the mind. Everything's the mind. And so I developed a hypnotherapy coaching program that I have seen remarkable results, and I work with children and I work with adults and everything in between, where I've had gastroenterologists say to me, this kid wasn't eating and he was vomiting. Why is this happening? They send it to me. I've had people who have had severe depression, suicidal, medication, dependency on marijuana, within 3 months, because the program's 3 months, it's in the past, and they're rewriting their stories. I've had somebody who has been sexually assaulted from childhood to adulthood, addiction, ADHD, and one of my areas of expertise is neurodivergence as well, and twice exceptionality, where she didn't think that she could ever live a normal life. And she came to me and she said, I don't think this is going to work, but I could see that she wanted to live another way. And that's the key. She didn't have to think it was going to work. She had to want to live another way. And when I heard that in her, I said, okay, let's go. And I always say this, I'm the expert guide, and I combine all of my trainings and whatever I can. And I also ask God to speak through me before every session, because truly, if I'm connected, that's where it goes. And I said, I'm the expert guide. I have the methodologies. You have to do the work. And as long as I have that buy-in and they're ready to invest in themselves, I see magic happen. I see magic happen every day. And the clinker was, and I'll finish in a second, I got a call today for a referral while I was here. And backlash a little bit. On my way here, I was hit with a suitcase on the plane. I got injured on the plane. They whacked me in the face. Yeah, it was really, whew. And again, it was reminding me, and I was in a lot of pain, and I was brain fog, and I have multiple TBIs. So I was like, oh no. And then I had to be in charge of my mind. Again, I had to step into my power, and I had to say, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to apply every principle that I teach people and that I've done for myself to be where I am today. And I did so, and I stepped into my power. And in doing so, I utilized all my tools. My swelling went down. Everything started to get better. I was in pain. The pain started to get better. And then I got a call from somebody that was a referral from Gaza. He had been in Gaza, and he said to me, do you think that you can help me? I'm on active duty. I'm going to have to go back. I said, yeah, I can. And I know I can if you're ready to invest in yourself, and I can help you, because you can help yourself in spite of or despite your situation, your circumstance, or your environment. And so if you work with me, we'll work on not only what you've been through and excavate that, but we will also empower you to deal with and navigate whatever you have to do in life, and keep that inner part of you so that you stay connected to yourself, because that's really, truly the bottom line, staying connected to self. When you're self-connected, you can then be at peace and with harmony within. And I also teach, and I'll end with this, the Magic 7. The Magic 7 is lead with love, kindness, compassion, grace, mercy, redemption, and forgiveness. And when you practice the Magic 7 with everything else that I talked about, you can move forward in life in spite of or despite anything, including your environment, your situation, and your circumstances. Thank you.